Hi there, this is Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. I'm Ian Willoughby. In this episode, my guest is Helena Lukas, daughter of the major Czech photographer Jan Lukas. The family escaped from communist Czechoslovakia in the mid-1960s, and in New York were part of a Czech cultural elite in exile that included such names as Jiří Voskovec and Ferdinand Peroutka. Helena Lukas is currently in Czechia preparing an exhibition of her father's work that will open in the town of Dobrovice this coming weekend. And I caught up with her for this edition of Prague Talk. Your dad, Jan Lukas, was born in 1915.
Yes.
What kind of photography was he doing initially in the First Republic?
When he started at the age of 12, that's when he received his first camera as a gift. His first photographs are from hometown of his father, and I have those photographs, so they're 1927. And even the first photograph is beautiful. It's of the square with a man walking with just on one leg, so it's interesting. And then he started to photograph nature and women, and his photographs were successful. They were on covers of Czech magazines when he was 17, and even foreign magazines like Picture Post and some German magazines, Austrian magazines. So he felt like he was doing the right thing. His father was against it. He wanted him to be a businessman, so he had to go through a business school. And after the business school, his father kind of gave him more freedom, and he went to Vienna to an art school. And then his first real job that his father did approve of was at Baťa's film studios. And so he was like 21.
At the Baťa studios in Zlín, he was not only a photographer, but a cameraman too?
He was actually hired as a cameraman because that's what they needed. So he learned it and liked it, but not as much as still photography. So he was doing both things at the same time. And I think after 2 years, the occupation came, so it was all dismissed.
I know he took photos at the funeral of Masaryk, but yes. Did he also photograph Masaryk when he was still alive?
Yes. I have two or three portraits of Masaryk. One of them will be hanging in this upcoming exhibition. Yes, he did. He didn't know him personally, of course, but he did photograph him at a couple of occasions, yes.
And when the war came, your dad would have been in his 20s. Was he able to continue working?
He was able to continue working because he always worked just basically for himself. The first real job he had at the Zlín film studios. But then when the war came, I'm not sure. He made some living doing stills for films because film making was still going on in Prague. So he was the still photographer, odd jobs like that.
The Nazis used Barrandov, right?
Yes, they used it. So he did some work there. But he, as usual, worked a lot just for himself and hiding it away, hoping for the future to get better. And he also started working on his eventual first book called Země a lidé, Land and its People, which was very, safe in the sense that nobody was bothered by it, taking pictures of villages and fields. And so that's what he continued. He always gave himself self-assignments and continued with those.
I guess perhaps his best-known photograph originated during the war, a picture he took of a young Jewish girl called Vendulka Voglova in 1943.
Yes.
Could you please tell us the story of that picture?
Yes, the family were family friends for, years before that. And when they were called to report and to be removed, they called him the night before. They didn't have too much of a notice, but they said, tomorrow we got to go. So can you come and take a picture of us and say goodbye? So he did. And he said it was emotionally quite drastic, seeing these people that were intimate friends. And yet there was really nothing much he could do. So he took that picture. He took 3 pictures that evening of Vendulka, the portrait that's famous, and also of the whole family sitting on their suitcases. I will exhibit this picture now that she doesn't mind anymore because she passed away in 2017 and did give permission. It was a very, very emotional experience. He hid the film in the cellar of our building in the coals because he didn't even want to develop it. because then
it was too dangerous.
Right, then it would be around the image. So he didn't develop the film and hid it in the cellar in the coals. And after the war, he found it and it wasn't ruined, and he developed it.
And this girl, this Jan Lukas, she ended up in America, and you knew her in America?
Yes, I knew her. I knew of her, of course, my whole childhood, because we talked about her and we wrote to my parents wrote to each other. They left after 1948 because they were able to, as Jewish people, they were able to emigrate. So they moved to Canada, then they moved to the United States. And so we exchanged Christmas letters and things like that. So when we did escape and landed in New York, the first summer was really rough. The weather in New York was awful. To me, it was awful. Humid. I never experienced humidity like that. And she was so kind that she invited me, because everybody else started to work. I was only 16, so I did babysitting. But anyway, she invited me to come to her house in Ohio to save me from being so lonely and hot. And that's the first time I met her. And I realized she was only 20 years older than me. She was only 36. So like memories of what happened to her were right there with her. But to me, of course, she seemed old because I was 16. Only now I realize how time works in a very short kind of a way, To her, everything had to be still present. She had 3 children, eventually 4 children. So I helped her with the kids, and I was supposed to learn English that summer, but we kept speaking Czech. She was wonderful.
When the communist regime were installed here in Prague, how did that affect your dad's life? Did he just continue doing his work? I know, for example, he photographed Gottwald.
Not in person, no. I mean, I think he did photograph him on a podium somewhere, yes. Personally, no, he did not. He was one of those people that were not going to have anything to do with the communists. He did not try to play the game as like, I'm not against you, or like he was clearly against. And he had friends who were, some were communists, a lot of them anti-communist. And I remember him telling me how one of his friends, I don't know which one, I don't know the name, I don't care to know, said like, don't worry, we're not going to hang you. You're going to be safe. Even knowing my father's attitudes, he would say like, we're not going to hang you. Which I thought like, this is dreadful, a dreadful thing to say. So I was growing up with all kinds of hearing things like that. And we did have friends, 2 boys whose mother was locked up for years, and I just thought, like, is that going to happen to me, to us? It was not easy. It was no fun in that respect. In many other ways, we had lots of fun.
I read a profile of your dad that said that he photographed Stalin. Is that true?
No way. He did go to Moscow because he was sent to photograph Moscow, and I believe he went to the mausoleum, but Stalin was already gone out of it. It was only Lenin there. No way.
It seemed unlikely. I had to ask.
Did you read it somewhere?
Yes, I'll send it to you.
I would like to see that. It makes no sense because he did not visit Moscow until 1959. Stalin was gone. He rejoiced when Stalin died. There was another moral dilemma he was trying to explain to me. I remember when Gottwald and Stalin died and how there was happiness in my family. And my wife said, listen, there are distinctions. We never wish for someone's death. But there are moments when certain people are better for us dead than alive. And Stalin is one of those because he killed too many people. So he was trying to teach me the difficult distinctions.
Your dad seems to have had a really rich and varied career. For example, in 1958, his images were shown at the Laterna Magica Theatre at the Expo in Brussels, the World Exhibition.
Yes, that was surprising that they picked him to do it. He got even a gold medal of some sort from the government. And yes, that was one of those first trips. That was amazing. So because we expected him to come back with all kinds of gifts, which he did.
What were the circumstances of your family's departure from communist Czechoslovakia in 1965?
It was a complicated plan, long in the making. My mother wanted to leave right away in 1948. And my father said, nah, don't be silly. This is not going to last a long time. And then it was too late. Then you couldn't do it as a whole family. And he was never going to split us up. Some people left thinking then they can get the kids. And he said, like, we're never going to chance that. Anyway, 1965 was a complicated plan. Me and my dad went to Germany to visit relatives, and my mother and my sister were going to go to Yugoslavia. We're going to meet in Yugoslavia and try it from there because there was no Iron Curtain the way it was here in Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia. So we did that, except my mother was called to whoever was in charge, said like, oh, your husband's in Germany, so you're not leaving tomorrow for Yugoslavia. He's got to come back first. So we came back. Then we had a second plan. They said like, now you can go to Yugoslavia. So they did. And me and my father, we left for Hungary because he had a passport as an artist. That was the saving grace, that he had the real passport. And I was written in there somehow on a visa to go to the United States. Year before, there was another lucky trip. Anyway, we went through Hungary, got into Yugoslavia, where I wasn't supposed to be, but the Hungarian, we had a fight at the border, and all of a sudden he just let us go. We met my mother and sister, then we waited for another family, and then we broke through the border between Italy and Yugoslavia. And luckily there were no shooting, they didn't do anything to us, and the Italians with open arms took us in.
And what are your memories of the period leading up to this defection? Were you scared? Were you looking forward to it?
Oh, those were definitely talk of mixed feelings. We were in agreement. We did want to leave because my sister saw London the summer before, and I saw New York in the fall of '64, and that did solidify that, yes, there is another world. It is so much brighter, so much more exciting, and we agreed that we should try it and we should leave. On the other hand, we had the best of friends. We had the best of times here on a personal level. That was hard, and we could not say goodbye to anybody, not to my grandmother, not to our friends. So that was extremely hard. We left with a small suitcase, and that was it.
Was your sister older or younger?
She was younger. She knew a little bit more English because she studied it. I knew nothing of English, and I'm still not great at it. Anyway, that was tough because I went straight into 10th grade without any knowledge of English, and that was suffering.
And because your family left essentially with the clothes on your back, your dad's work, a lot of his earlier work was lost.
That was the biggest sadness, that we had to leave so much behind of his work. But he strangely was the most optimistic person I ever met, I think. Like losses like that did not seem to bother him. He did make a collection, important collection, and sent it off to his couple of friends, some to Vienna, some to London, some to Munich. So he had what was most important to him, he did send out, and he figured if we don't succeed, we'll just come back to me. But he left hundreds of thousands of negatives from the First Republic. But he didn't care about that work. It's like, oh, that was just pretty women and pretty pictures. And so he took his Prague diary, which he was proud of, and some other things. But then, he started from the beginning. He started from scratch.
How did he find the adjustment to living in America? Because he was moving to a whole new culture at the age of around 50.
He was 51 when we arrived there, which back then, so like, yeah, he's old. Now I think like, come on, 51, that's... But no, he felt kind of old, but he didn't care. He said he did it mainly for us. Whether he succeeds or not wasn't so important to him. He says, like, I want you girls growing up in a free world. That was his idea. And the culture shock to him was not that much at all, because we had so many Czech friends there that we started with that company. People that left before the war in 1938, that left right after the war. So there was a huge Czech community that was very interesting and lots of fun, and we met together very often. So the American friendship started much slower, of course. That was not as natural as the Czech friends.
Also, fortunately for him, he had a skill that was easily transferable to another culture.
Yes. Like I would say actors or writers had it much more difficult than he did.
And who were some of the people that he knew? I know, for example, he would hang out with Ferdinand Peroutka, the journalist, the actor Jiří Voskovec.
Yes. Most of the Czech friends, it also helped us to emigrate to New York, because they had to give a guarantee that we will not be a burden and so on. They lived like within a few blocks of us. It was the west side, right by Central Park, and there was Voskovec on 89th Street. We were on 86th Street. Sasha Hamid Hackenschmied, he was on 89th. Voskovec was 87. I'm confusing it. But anyway, so all these people lived really close. Koldas lived very close by too. Only Peroutka, he lived all the way in Queens, but there's subway, so there was no problem. Yes, it was easy to meet up with them, and we did a lot.
And he also photographed around that time the great American director Sidney Lumet.
Because he was visiting Voskovec. There were some parties at Voskovec's house, and he would...
Who he cast in the movie 12 Angry Men.
Right, exactly. My most favorite film, yes. So he's got photographs of him. I believe that will be exhibited in next week.
Did you spend much time with these people like Miloš Forman and so on?
Not as much as my father, but yes, quite a bit. Actually, my sister's 18th birthday, was it 18th or 19th, whatever, was celebrated on the roof of Sasha Hackenschmied's house, and we have a wonderful photograph with Miloš Forman and some other directors. Yes, there were parties and gets-togethers.
Some of his best-known photographs also are of Václav Havel, when he, in 1968, visited New York and was photographed by your dad in Central Park.
That was a very special time, obviously, 1968, the spring off. That's when I, for the first time, really regretted. I was like, maybe we didn't have to escape. Maybe we should have just waited it out a few more years. And that's the time that Václav Havel managed to come to New York. And his story was lovely. I'm proud of it because he says he arrived, and I guess he didn't let too many. He didn't know anybody. So he went to the phone booth, which back then still had the phone books, and looked up Lukas and called my father up. So then my father just took him around and introduced him to everybody.
But they had known each other in Prague?
Yes, my father photographed a lot on Divadlo Zábradlí, where Havel's first play, the Zahradní slavnost.
The Garden Party.
The Garden Party. And yeah, I remember watching it and my father taking pictures. So yes, he knew him back then, but he was not that important.
I also was reading that your father photographed 3 American presidents, Kennedy, Nixon, and Reagan. What's the background to those pictures?
The Kennedy, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there is a photograph which will be exhibited. And that's one of those lucky moments, as my father said, you always have to have your eyes ready. He was in Rome, 1963, June 63, so very shortly before Kennedy's death. And he was sent there by Artia, the publishing house that then sold books for export. So he's in Rome, and he's kind of a commotion. So he's just like, what's going on? Click. And there is a car with Kennedy driving in it. And he's got it. That's how he photographed him. He was not invited or anything like that. With Reagan, it was a little bit more personal. Yes, he was invited to actually photograph certain occasions, parties and things. So yes, he's got him. And the same with Richard Nixon. He photographed the Democratic and the Republican convention in 1972. And that's where he had, of course, even the other candidates. That was going to be for Life magazine. And with his luck, it was like pre-printed. He saw it, and then Life magazine folded. That's one thing that did bother him.
You also are a photographer. Was it kind of inevitable that you would enter the family business?
No, I don't think it was inevitable. I was not going to do it. I was not, because my father was a photographer. So I studied diplomacy. I was going to be a diplomat. And those plans changed because I had 4 children, and I said, like, I'm not going to, that was tough. So I gave up on diplomacy and was always interested in my father's work. As a child, I worked with him in the darkroom. He involved me in choosing pictures for his book. So I felt very much part of his work in that sense. And then when my children started to grow up and they didn't need me as much, I returned to school and got a master's degree in photography.
Do you feel an influence of your dad on your work?
Of course I do. But I am not like him at all. I felt the influence always like, I cannot be like him. I'm afraid of photographing people the way he was a shy person, and yet it didn't bother him to photograph people, catch them. I'm scared of people of bothering them. So I have a hard time with that, and my photography is not that documentary. Unless I have a real project and I know I have the permission, then I do it. But otherwise, no.
Your dad had a long life, and he lived to see the end of communism. He lived until the year 2006, and it was 91. Did he return here much after 89? He
returned at least 2 times, if it wasn't 3 times. My memory is beginning to fade. He definitely came, I would say 1991, visited FAMU, had a small exhibition, or just like his prints were passed around. So he met with photographers then. And then he had a big exhibition in 1995 at Manes. And that was quite wonderful. Because the amount of people that poured into Manes, he was shocked and pleased. He didn't think people would remember.
And he also photographed Havel around that time, I guess, in Prague, of course.
Yes, that was the same year. After the exhibition, or during the exhibition, Havel invited him to come to the castle. And my father took me along, so I have that proud moment. It was incredible.
Well, tell us more about it.
Well, it lasted about an hour, and we just walked through those long hallways until, we were ushered into his office, and then we had a coffee with him and spent 45 minutes and photographed with him. It was amazing, and that's what we talked about, how life is amazing, the turns it takes.
Do you spend much time in Czechia yourself these days?
Actually, quite a bit, but there's no plan or no rhyme or reason to it, except, the rhyme and reason there are usually for work, to do something about my father's work, prepare exhibitions. Sometimes it's just personal. I am drawn to coming back to Prague. To me, is home, the most beautiful city. And I love being here.
You're currently in Prague working on a new exhibition of your dad's work called Two Lives. It's going to be in Dobrovice, a town in central Bohemia. A small town. Why there? He's not from there.
He's not from there, but there is a family connection. My grandmother's excellent cook. Back then you did have cooks when you were better off. So was this beautiful woman, Jiří Voskovec, and so my father knew her from his teenage years, and then she took care of us, his children, for a while, and we just kept contact. We called her Teta, auntie, and we spent summers in Dobrovice, and those were the best summers. And that's where we left from. We got the telegram that we have to go to Prague to start that escaping plan. So that town is in my memory forever, friendships, first loves, that kind of stuff. So I cannot wait to go back.
I'm sure you're biased, but what do you think makes your dad a great photographer?
Of course I am biased. I think it was his incredible interest in other people, in their stories, in the bigger picture, the history of the country, which is composed of the little histories. And he just never really, his interest was always there. He was always ready to record it because it was important to him.
And do you feel he is sufficiently acknowledged in this country? To me, he's a great photographer because I'm interested in him. How do you feel about this question?
I think it's absolutely normal that older generations sometimes don't get that much attention anymore. It's kind of inborn in the young people to pay attention to themselves, and it's normal. So no, I'm actually surprised that he's remembered at all, because for 20 years, from what I hear, he was not allowed to be mentioned. If his picture were published, it would say, I don't know, somebody else's name or anonymous or whatever. So I think to me it's quite amazing that he's that well known and acknowledged. No, I'm very happy.
Many thanks indeed to Helena Lukas, who kindly spoke to me for this edition of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. If you're new to the pod and enjoyed our conversation, why not look up some of the over 120 previous editions and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. But for now, that's all from me, Ian Willoughby. Thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.